The funeral home went silent the moment my mother's voice sliced through the quiet murmur of mourners. "You changed your name." Not a question. An accusation. Every head in that chapel turned toward me like dominoes falling in reverse. My father's knuckles went white around his program. My brother Derek froze mid-laugh in the doorway, his smile dying on his lips. I slid into the second-row pew, the memorial program still warm in my hands, my new name printed there in bold black letters that suddenly felt like a confession I hadn't planned to make. The seat beside me, the one with the small card that read "Reserved for Family," sat empty. Just like it always had. Just like every important moment of my life they'd casually decided to skip. But as I stared at that vacant space, something inside me shifted. They thought this moment exposed me, revealed some petty rebellion, some childish act of revenge. They had no idea it was exposing them. I grew up in the spaces between louder lives. In our house in Charlotte, volume equaled value, and my voice never carried enough weight to matter. I can still hear the sharp click of my mother's heels on the hardwood whenever Derek needed something, how she'd drop everything and rush to him with this urgent energy my needs never inspired. My sister Amber always got the soft voice, the gentle hand on her shoulder, the kind of lingering attention that made everyone in the room lean toward her like she was the sun. I was the quiet one. The one who cleaned up her own messes, packed her own school lunches, and learned before I hit double digits that interrupting the conversations flowing over my head was pointless. The first time I really understood the pattern, I was 12 years old. Amber had a school art exhibition, rows of her watercolor paintings displayed along the gymnasium walls like we were at some fancy gallery opening. My mother hovered beside her the entire evening, smiling for the neighbors, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from Amber's dress, basking in reflected glory. I stood in the corner clutching the certificate I'd received that same morning, a first-place award from the regional mathematics competition. Nobody from my family had come to the ceremony. They hadn't even remembered what time it started. Mom walked right past me like I was part of the wall. "Hold your sister's purse," she said, pressing the designer bag into my hands without even glancing at my face. I folded that certificate into my jacket pocket, the paper crinkling loud enough that I swear the sound echoed. But nobody heard it. Nobody ever did. Years slid by, and the pattern only deepened. During my high school graduation, they showed up late. The ceremony had already started, the principal halfway through her opening remarks. My row of classmates had to shuffle and crane their necks as my family searched for seats, drawing stares and whispered complaints. When my name was called, I stood up and scanned the sea of faces for the four that mattered most. I found them, finally settled into their chairs. But the seat they'd saved for me in the family section afterward? Empty. Derek and Amber had ditched the ceremony entirely for some lake party, and my parents had gotten stuck in traffic, though I found out later they'd stopped at a coffee shop for half an hour. I gripped that graduation program so hard the corner tore clean off in my hand. College should have been different. At Duke University, I convinced myself that distance would make them see me clearer, that my achievements would finally cut through the noise. I was wrong. I sent calendar invitations weeks in advance for my departmental honors ceremony. Amber responded with a heart emoji. Derek left it on read. My parents replied 3 days later with a breezy "we'll try." They never showed. That night, I sat alone on the stone steps outside the student center, eating Chinese takeout straight from the container, my award still sealed in the envelope they'd never bothered to open. A group of students walked past, laughing about meeting their families at some restaurant downtown. I smiled and nodded like I was waiting for someone too. The older I got, the smaller my voice became. I learned that pushing back only triggered my mother's favorite response, "Don't be so dramatic, Katrina." Dad would murmur his agreement without looking up from whatever was on his phone screen. My objections grew quieter each year shorter, until eventually they just stopped altogether. I stopped expecting them to remember. Stopped hoping they'd prioritize me. Stopped believing I mattered enough to take up space in their carefully curated family narrative. The memory that stayed lodged in my chest like a splinter, sharp and infected, was the symposium where I presented my early research on sustainable water filtration systems. I'd reserved 5 seats in the front row, sent detailed reminders, even called the week before to confirm. All 5 seats stayed empty. I stood at that podium holding my notes, trying to focus on the panel of professors and visiting researchers, but my eyes kept drifting to those vacant chairs. Halfway through my presentation, my phone buzzed on the podium. A text from Derek, accompanied by a photo of him manning the grill at some backyard cookout, beer in hand, smoke rising behind him. "Wish you were here," he'd written. He didn't wish anything. He just didn't think. None of them did. That was the day I understood my place in the family hierarchy. I was the margin note, the footnote, the easily forgotten detail that didn't affect the main story. I existed at the edges of their lives, invisible unless I stayed completely silent and made no demands whatsoever. The shift didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, like water pressure behind a dam, quiet and relentless and inevitable. But the day that dam finally cracked open was ordinary. Deceptively normal. Almost boring in its simplicity. 8 months before my dissertation defense, I sent the announcement to my family. A formal notice from Stanford's graduate school, the date and time printed in crisp black ink on heavy cardstock. I mailed copies to the house in Charlotte, texted everyone individually, posted it in the family group chat. May 15th, 2 p.m., I wrote. "Hope you can make it." Mom responded hours later with a distracted, "So proud of you, sweetheart." Amber sent a thumbs up emoji. Derek typed back, "Nice job, sis." My father didn't respond at all. I told myself it was enough. It had to be. Through the winter months, I repeated that date at every possible opportunity. Sunday video calls, Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas when I flew home for 3 days. May 15th, I'd say casually, weaving it into conversation like dropping breadcrumbs. Mom would nod without looking up from her phone. Dad would grunt something that might have been acknowledgement. Amber talked endlessly about her twin boys' soccer tournaments. Derek couldn't stop updating everyone on his new Tesla and his latest home renovation project. But I kept reminding them anyway. 5 months out. 3 months. 6 weeks. 2 weeks. Each reminder felt like tapping on glass that nobody was standing behind, my voice disappearing into a void that swallowed sound. Then in March, Derek posted an invitation to the family group chat. Spring cookout blowout. The graphic announced in bold letters. May 15th, 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Bring your appetite. He'd created a whole event page, complete with RSVP tracking and a menu poll. I stared at my phone screen until the words blurred. When I called him, he answered on the 4th ring, music thumping in the background. "What's up? What time is my dissertation defense?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady. "Oh, He paused. I could practically hear him scrolling through messages. "What time was that again?" 2 o'clock. May 15th. "I've told you 20 times, Derek." Right. "Hey, people can do both though. Just swing by after your thing wraps up. It's literally just a couple hours, right?" Stanford was 4 hours from Charlotte. He knew that. He'd visited my campus twice. He just didn't care. I called my mother next. She answered while clearly at some social event, voices and laughter echoing behind her. "Oh honey, don't be dramatic," she said when I explained the conflict. "We'll work something out. It's not like we'd miss your big day." But I felt it then. That quiet, sinking certainty settling in my stomach like stones. They weren't confused. They weren't dealing with a scheduling conflict. They had simply chosen. Someone else's event. Someone else's importance. Someone else. Like they always did. The confirmation came the day before my defense. I called Mom one final time, needing to hear her say it explicitly. She answered with crowd noise in the background, her voice thin and distant. "I'm at Derek's helping with setup," she explained. "It's absolute chaos here. He went all out this year." "And tomorrow?" I asked. May 15th. 2 p.m. "Of course, sweetie. We'll be there. Amber's bringing her famous lemon bars." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the dissertation I'd spent 3 years researching and writing. All those late nights. All those sacrifices. All that work. And tomorrow, when I stood up to defend it, when I presented my findings to a room full of professors and colleagues and visiting scholars, there would be 5 empty seats where my family should have been. But this time, I wasn't going to cry about it. This time, something else was building inside me. Something colder. Something final. The next afternoon, I stood in the hallway outside Carnegie Hall, smoothing my blazer and reviewing my note cards one final time. My phone buzzed. Then again. And again. I pulled it from my pocket. "Where are you?" The text from Mom read. "We're all at Derek's. When are you getting here?" I stared at those words. Read them 3 times. Let their meaning sink in like ink into paper, permanent and undeniable. They weren't asking where the defense was. They weren't apologizing for running late. They genuinely expected me to skip my own dissertation defense to attend Derek's barbecue. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and absolute. And in that silence, something inside me clicked into place like a lock turning. I gathered my notes, walked into that auditorium, and defended 3 years of intensive research on sustainable urban water systems to a room full of people who actually showed up. The panel asked questions. I answered them. They deliberated. I waited. And when it was over, when congratulations, Dr. Katrina Brennan echoed through the chamber and everyone applauded, I felt nothing but a familiar ache so deep it had become part of my skeleton. My phone vibrated continuously in my bag. I didn't check it. That night, while messages from my family piled up unanswered, I sat in my apartment with the blinds half closed. The reading lamp cast long shadows across my desk, illuminating stacks of research papers, my laptop, and the program from the ceremony. I smoothed the crease running down its center one last time. Then I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I titled it Transition.
No emotion. No hesitation.
Just a folder. And inside it, the first steps toward a life they would no longer have access to. I started with the practical essentials. Downloaded the name change petition from the county website. Printed it. The sound of my printer humming in the quiet apartment felt oddly grounding, like an anchor dropping. I read through every page of instructions, highlighting sections with steady strokes. Required documents. Identification guidelines. Filing procedures. My hand didn't shake once. Next came the financial accounts. I logged into each one systematically, updating contact information, saving statements into folders labeled with careful precision. I created 2 spreadsheets. One listing every account connected to my current name. Another mapping how each would transition under my new identity. It wasn't revenge. It was infrastructure. It was building a life with better foundations. By midnight, that folder contained more organization and structure than my family had offered me in 28 years. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The air felt cool and sharp, sunlight cutting through my blinds in clean lines. I made coffee, watching steam rise in slow ribbons while I reviewed the petition one final time. Then I changed into pressed slacks and a navy blouse, pulled my hair back neatly, and drove to the county courthouse. The building rose pale and imposing against a cloudless sky. Inside, the clerk slid a stack of forms across the counter toward me. "Fill these out completely," she said in a bored voice. "Sign and date everything." I found a seat by a tall window and began. Line by line, signature by signature, my new name settled into each blank space like it had always belonged there. Katrina Morrison. Not Brennan. Morrison. My grandmother's maiden name, the one woman in my family who'd actually seen me as someone worth remembering. When I handed the completed documents back, the clerk stamped the top page. The sound was crisp. "Final. Processing takes about 4 weeks," she said. "That's fine," I replied. Outside, the sunlight felt different. Clearer. Like I was seeing it without dirty glass in the way. The next phase took days of quiet, methodical work. I updated my email first, creating a clean address with no connection to my family domain. I transferred all my research materials, publications, and professional contacts to a new cloud drive. Then I deleted the old one. Archived every message from colleagues and mentors, organizing them under my new identity. The only folder I kept completely intact was labeled Grandma Ruth, filled with photos and the birthday card she'd sent me throughout college. Her handwriting had always looked certain, confident. Even when mine still trembled. By the end of the week, my entire digital existence no longer contained the name Brennan. The physical transition came next. I gave notice on my apartment, citing a job opportunity in another state. I packed systematically, books stacked in labeled boxes, clothes folded in precise rows, picture frames wrapped carefully in packing paper. The night before the movers arrived, I stood in the center of my empty living room, listening to the refrigerator hum and a streetlight buzz outside. My phone lit up every few minutes. Calls from Mom. Texts from Amber. Voicemails from Derek. I didn't answer any of them. When the moving truck pulled away carrying everything I owned toward Seattle, I locked the apartment door one final time and rested my palm against the cool metal. Not sentiment. Just a moment of stillness before the next chapter. The drive north took 3 days. Long stretches of interstate, rest stops with flickering vending machines, cheap motels where I paid cash and used my old name one last time. I stopped only for gas and coffee, watching the miles accumulate on my odometer like evidence of distance traveled. Each hour felt like threads dissolving, frayed connections falling away in my rearview mirror. Seattle greeted me with gray skies and soft rain. Perfect, I thought. A city where silence felt like breathing instead of punishment. My new apartment was small but bright, with a narrow balcony overlooking a tree-lined street where people walked dogs and pushed strollers without knowing anything about me. I unpacked the box labeled Work First, setting up my desk with research papers, notebooks, and a single photograph, me and Grandma Ruth at her 80th birthday dinner, both of us laughing at something nobody else had found funny. I pinned it above my monitor. The next morning, I walked into the environmental consulting firm that had offered me a position 3 months earlier. The receptionist greeted me warmly. "You must be Katrina Morrison. Welcome aboard." My new colleagues introduced themselves one by one, shaking my hand, asking about my research background, treating me like someone who mattered. Nobody asked about my family. Nobody compared me to siblings. Nobody expected me to shrink myself to make room for louder personalities. I sat at my new desk, logged into my new email, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Steadiness. Solid ground. In the evenings, I continued the quiet work of transformation. Changed my driver's license. Updated voter registration. Transferred medical records. Reassigned emergency contacts. Closed the last bank account bearing my old surname. Each task brought its own small sound. The tap of keyboard keys. The click of a submit button. The soft tear of an envelope being opened. Not dramatic. Not triumphant. Just precise. Controlled. Mini. Some nights I'd sit at my desk with the window cracked open, cool air drifting inside, and reach for another form to complete. Each time, that familiar tightness in my chest eased a little more. This time, I thought, sliding another document into my completed folder, I'm not fixing what they broke. I'm just building something they can't touch. It wasn't revenge. It was a boundary. Finally written down. Finally enforced. The notification arrived on a gray Tuesday morning 6 weeks after I'd settled into Seattle. Your name change petition has been approved. One simple sentence. A quiet switch flipped. I printed the confirmation page, still warm from the printer, and slipped it into my folder labeled Legal Identity. The updated documents came in waves after that. New driver's license. New social security card. New bank cards with Katrina Morrison embossed in silver letters. My workplace updated their records. My landlord updated the lease. Soon, nothing in my life would carry the name my family had attached to someone they consistently forgot. I didn't announce it. Didn't send a group text or make a phone call. I just lived. But silence has a way of echoing when people expect noise. The first ripple came through an email forwarded by my company's HR department. Your listed emergency contact attempted to access your personnel file. Your previous phone number is disconnected. Your previous email address is no longer active. The contact has been flagged as unverified. Access denied automatically. Another ripple arrived the following week. My old apartment manager in California left a voicemail on my work line. Your family has been calling repeatedly asking for your forwarding address. Per privacy regulations, we cannot disclose tenant information without written consent. I didn't provide any. A month later, curiosity got the better of me. I powered on the old phone I'd kept in my desk drawer, the one tied to my previous life. 86 missed calls from my mother. Dozens from Amber. A handful from Derek. 2 from Dad. I scrolled through the voicemail transcripts, watching the progression from confused to angry to desperate. Where are you? Call me back. Katrina, this isn't funny anymore. We need to talk. You're completely overreacting to a simple miscommunication. This silence is childish and manipulative. You owe us an explanation. Family doesn't just disappear. I owed them nothing. I turned the phone off and returned it to the drawer. The air felt lighter somehow. Then came the moment when everything converged. Great-Aunt Ruth passed away, quietly and peacefully in her sleep. She was 93 years old and one of the only people who'd ever truly seen me. The funeral was scheduled in Charlotte. I knew I had to go. Not for my family. For her. The funeral home looked exactly like I remembered. Polished wood pews. Soft lighting. Air thick with the scent of lilies and old carpet. I arrived early before the crowd and chose a seat near the center aisle. The memorial program rested in my hands, Ruth's smiling face on the cover. And there, in the list of surviving family members, my name appeared, Katrina Morrison, great-niece. They arrived like a storm. Mom stopped dead in the doorway when she saw me. Her eyes went to the program in my hands, then to my face, then back to the program. You changed your name. Not shock. Not hurt. Judgment. Dad's jaw clenched. Amber stared like I'd grown a second head. Derek looked like someone had punched him in the gut. You should have told us, Mom hissed under her breath as she slid into the pew behind me. You should have shown up, I replied without turning around. She opened her mouth to argue, but the funeral director called for everyone to take their seats. During the entire service, I felt their eyes on me more than they looked at Ruth's casket. Every few minutes, Mom would lean forward slightly, trying to catch my attention. Amber kept glancing at the program like it might change if she looked hard enough. Derek sat rigid, arms crossed, radiating confusion and anger. After the final prayer, Mom followed me outside to the parking lot. Katrina, this isn't fair, she said, her voice low and urgent. We made a mistake. One mistake. Families move past these things. I stopped beside my rental car, the breeze catching the edge of my coat. You chose Derek's barbecue over my doctorate, I said calmly. You didn't forget. You prioritized. That's the truth. That's not. It is, I interrupted. And now the systems I exist in only recognize people who show up. You weren't listed as emergency contacts. You weren't updated as next of kin. The rest handled itself. Her face shifted as understanding landed. There was no argument she could make against court records, state databases, legal documents. Love could be claimed. Paperwork was immune to guilt. Amber approached next, her voice tight. You didn't have to take it this far, Katrina. You could have just talked to us. I tried talking, I said. For 28 years. Nobody listened. Derek stayed by the building, watching from a distance. He didn't approach. Didn't speak. Just stared with this look that said he finally understood something important had broken, and he'd been holding the hammer the whole time. I got into my car, closed the door, and watched their shapes blur through the windshield as I drove away. They couldn't follow. Not legally. Not digitally. Not emotionally. The life connected to my old name had ended without ceremony. The one tied to my new name was already thriving. And for the first time in my entire life, the loss wasn't mine to carry. Seattle settled around me the way evening settles over calm water, quiet, unhurried, indifferent in the gentlest possible way. Months passed, and the rhythms of my new life formed themselves naturally. I walked to work under low gray skies that felt comforting rather than oppressive. I brewed coffee in my small kitchen, the sound of water filling silence instead of breaking it. On my desk, drafts of water reclamation proposals spread across the wood in careful stacks, lit by diffuse morning light that made everything look softer than it actually was. Slowly, the stillness stopped feeling foreign. My name, Katrina Morrison, appeared on project memos, email signatures, published reports. Each time I saw it, something inside me anchored a little deeper. At meetings, colleagues asked for my input without comparing me to anyone else, without qualifying my worth against siblings I'd supposedly never measure up to. After work, my coworker Brennan would invite me for coffee. Or Alex from the sustainability division would text about trying a new Thai place downtown. They listened when I spoke. They remembered details from previous conversations. They asked about my desalination research with genuine interest. Some nights I'd sit on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, the city humming softly in the distance, rain tracing quiet lines down the metal railing. I'd think about that empty chair at my dissertation defense, the one I'd stared at before starting my presentation. The image still returned sometimes, but its shape had changed. It wasn't a wound anymore. Just a memory. Small and flat, like a photograph tucked at the back of a drawer you rarely open. I didn't hate them. That surprised me more than anything. Hatred required energy I no longer wanted to spend. The legal paperwork had accomplished something I'd never managed emotionally. It carved a clean boundary. Not a wall. Just a line. On one side, the life where I waited endlessly to be chosen. On the other, the life where I chose myself first. When I'd walked out of that courthouse months ago with my approved petition, I hadn't been running from my family. I'd been walking toward myself. Toward a name that belonged to someone who showed up for her own life, even when nobody else did. Now, in the soft drizzle of a Seattle evening, I realized something quieter than forgiveness and simpler than closure. I wasn't missing anymore. I wasn't lost. I wasn't waiting for someone to notice I'd arrived. I had arrived. And I'd done it on my own terms. Boundaries aren't punishments, I've learned. They're proof of where you finally learned to stand. My family spent years forgetting me in rooms I'd worked desperately hard to enter. So I built a life in a place where showing up wasn't optional, it was foundational. Now when I sign my name, Katrina Morrison, the silence that follows isn't empty. It's mine. And some doors stay closed simply because I no longer need what's behind them.